Hello and welcome to the Week 8 Football Outsiders Coach Ranking Show. I'm your host, Ian O'Connor, Senior Data Analyst at Football Outsiders. And joining me as he does every week is Vince Verhei, Football Outsiders Assistant Editor. Today we're going to be looking back on some of the games and coaching strategies from Week 7, as well as looking ahead to a couple Week 8 matchups. So going to be a really good show. But first, want to remind you about FO Plus, our premium subscription. On footballoutsiders.com. You can get that at footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. Gives you access to a lot of premium, really good data, premium stats, premium articles, fantasy rankings. You get an ad-free experience and you get access to all of our data on Monday instead of having to wait until Tuesday, even for that free data. So you get access early before everyone else that doesn't have FO Plus. Again, sign up at footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. And secondly, don't forget to play on Underdog Fantasy with us, and you can double your first deposit up to $100 using promo code OUTSIDERS. They've got some really good weekly action there. Their Battle Royale, which is a best ball style draft that goes weekly, as well as their Pick'em games, which is basically parlaying up to five prop bets, higher or lower stats for players. You can do that even in states where traditional prop betting currently is not available. Underdog is the fastest growing fantasy site around, so join the fun over at underdogfantasy.com or download the Underdog app and use promo code OUTSIDERS now to double your first deposit up to $100. Now, without further ado, Vince, we'll just dive right into some of that action I talked about from last week. The big story, I think, so far, one of the biggest stories in the NFL is Tampa Bay. But what is going on with Brady and the Bucs? They've now lost 2 straight games to the Steelers and the Panthers, both embarrassing losses. They're only 19th in offense, and if you take out that Chiefs game a few weeks ago, they're 25th. So what are you seeing from the Bucs that you think is causing these issues that they've got? Because they've got a lot of the same players they've had the last few years.
Well, they do have a lot of the same players they've had the last few years, but they don't have all of them.
Right.
Ryan Jensen has not played this year. They're hopeful he might be able to return for the playoffs. Aaron Stinney was going to be a starting lineman this year. He has been hurt the entire year. And so when you take out those 2 big pieces right in the middle of the offensive line, everything around them kind of falls to crap. The 31st in rushing offense DVOA ahead of only Jonathan Taylor on the Colts, which is another issue. But you look at our offensive line stats, they're in the bottom 5 in adjusted line yards, bottom 5 in stuff rate, bottom 5 in second level yards, so they're not getting 10 yards very often, and bottom 5 in open field yards, so they're not getting big plays either. And even here's a case where I think sometimes just basic raw counting stats are pretty accurate and tell you what's going on. And the Buccaneers are dead last in rushing yards in the NFL. They are dead last in yards per carry in the NFL, only 3.0 yards per run. And Mecole Hardman, who is a wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, had as many rushing touchdowns against the 49ers this Sunday as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a team have all year.
Wow.
So everything is going wrong up front. It starts up front. They also Rob Gronkowski retired, and then they have not, Cade Otton has not been a good replacement there. And then we just look around the rest of the team, the wide receivers, the running backs, and yes, even the quarterback. Everyone else is playing just a little bit worse than they did last year, and it all adds up to this very frustrating football team we're seeing here.
And Mike Evans had that huge, you mentioned the lack of big plays, but had a big drop that could have made things that game could have gone differently, still should have, but really, could have changed their numbers here. Still, one play isn't gonna vault them up any higher from 25th as they've been out after that, or without including that Kansas City game, but really a lot of struggles there. Now, we know Todd Bowles took over as the head coach now. Byron Leftwich is still there as the offense coordinator. Do you think, did Bruce Arians maybe have a bigger impact than people realize on this team with him stepping down in the offseason and kind of having all these problems now, aside from those injuries we talked about?
That's a really hard question to answer without being on the ground in Tampa Bay and knowing what's going on, because they're losing a bunch of close games and they're not scoring as many points as they used to. But there's no obvious like strategic errors they're making. They're not suddenly doing crazy play calls or being super conservative on fourth downs or anything, or just making tons and tons of dumb mistakes, bad penalties, and bad situations, that kind of thing. They're just getting outplayed just a little bit every week. Now that's possible. That's the kind of thing you can't measure.
Right.
We don't have any analytical method to measure morale or preparation factor or anything like
Yep.
that. It does seem like they're making, more. You saw the Mike Evans drop, and that probably doesn't happen last year, or at least it feels like it doesn't happen last year. But without actually talking to the people with the Buccaneers or who are covering the team every day, I don't know how much of this is a great coaching mistake and how much of it is some bad critical injuries. And everyone, players are human beings. They don't play the same every game. They don't, or the same game to game. They don't play the same year to year. And it just feels like everyone on offense is playing just a little bit worse than they did the year before.
Yeah, and they still find themselves at the top of the NFC South, which isn't really saying much this year. They're tied, but have the tiebreaker on Atlanta there. So long way to go. Even a little bit of improvement, they could run away with that division the way everyone else is playing. So we'll have to wait and see. Like we said, they've still got some of the talent and the playmakers there. And Tom Brady maybe has his mind a little bit in some other places as we know things going on. But that again isn't something we can quantify. And we don't know. Maybe he's just not playing well. Age catching up to him. Maybe. I mean, only time will tell. But still a lot of football left to play. Now the other big story from this weekend, the Chiefs and 49ers. This game was close in the first half. Kansas City was only up 1 at halftime. Then they outscored San Francisco 30-10 in the second half. What did you see that the Chiefs did, or maybe the 49ers failed to do after the half? I know Jimmy Garoppolo had that horrible interception in the first half, but this game was still close.
All right. With all due respect, Ian, I'm afraid your premise here is a little bit faulty because the Chiefs did not just dominate the second half, they dominated 4 quarters. They just had a little trouble scoring points. Let's look at what happened in this Chiefs offense in this first half here. First drive was a 3-and-out with a tip drill interception. Well, that's no good. Second drive, 9 plays, 73 yards, touchdown. Third drive, 10 plays, 90 yards, touchdown. Fourth and final drive of the half, 8 plays, 73 yards. They got into scoring range, ran out of time, had to try a field goal on third down, and then missed the kick. But you add all that up, those drive totals, that includes penalty yardage. If you just look at the actual runs and passes, 249 yards in 29 plays. That's 8.6 yards per play. That's phenomenal. So really, they blew the 49ers off the field the entire game, just with a couple of plays in the first half cost them points. The tip drill pick and some bad execution when they get down in the red zone. They probably should have been ahead 21, or excuse me, should have been ahead 21-13. That tip drill bounces a different way. Maybe they get a field goal on that drive or a score on that drive. Who knows? But they were moving the ball up and down the field on San Francisco basically whenever they wanted. Now, the other question is, how do they do that? How do they do it in the second half? How do they do it in the first half, too? The short answer is they have the best quarterback in the world.
Mhm.
And people don't like to hear that sometimes. There's a lot of good quarterbacks, and they have their favorites they like to hear. But I'm sorry, Patrick Mahomes is better than your guy. He just is. And they let him win games in that first half, 29 first half plays, 21 passes. They didn't try to establish the run for any particular sake. They said, hey, we're the best quarterback in the world. Let's let him go win this game. And eventually he did. And a big part of that, they were able to pass so much because their offensive line also dominated San Francisco's fearsome pass rush, which is saying a lot. But Nick Bosa had 1 sack. Nobody else on the 49ers managed to sack the entire game. They only had 3 quarterback hits the entire game. So when you take the best quarterback in the world and you give him excellent pass protection, you're going to win pretty much every game.
Yeah, that is a good recipe for success there. And last week we talked about with San Francisco losing to Atlanta, there were a lot of injuries on the defense. Had a lot of those guys back. I think the only one missing still was Eric Armstead. So to your point, like they were healthy. They were one of the top 5 defenses in the league. I think they were number 2 at the time going into last week. Is that right?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. They've been very, very good most of the year. They struggled in the loss to Atlanta, and then obviously this weekend here against Kansas City. But almost everyone struggles against Kansas City.
Absolutely, as you mentioned, best quarterback in the league. So, really good game for Kansas City. Those receivers broke out. Pretty much all of them had a good game. We saw Mecole Hardman had 3 total touchdowns in that one. Juju Smith-Schuster had the touchdown at the end. So, a really big day for Kansas City all around. We talked about Andy Reid kind of being at the bottom of the list in 4th down aggressiveness. Really didn't need it too much in this game because, as you mentioned, they were just pretty much dominating from the start there. Now, I mentioned, and you mentioned the game last week San Francisco had against the Falcons. They committed not a Cardinal sin, maybe a Falcon sin, it seems like. And that's what I want to talk about next. Typically, you've got a team that runs the ball 29 times, passes only 13 times. You'd think they'd win the game. That's what Atlanta did, and they lost to the Bengals. They trailed by 7 or more on 100% of their offensive plays and ran the ball on fit, or they dropped back only 45% of their plays. I saw that from Dwayne McFarland of Fantasy Life there with Matthew Berry. The league average in that scenario is 72%. Like, I know that's what Atlanta does. That's what they like to do. But what do you like? What do you think happened? Did Arthur Smith just say our best chance to win is by running the ball, even though we're down the whole game?
It was really really weird. Officially, I believe 29 runs and 13 passes. That includes scrambles as running plays. But Marcus Mariota, didn't have a ton of scrambles this game. I think he only scrambled 3 or 4 times. So yeah, they were running like crazy. And the thing is, it was such a weird game because the Bengals just came out on fire. It was 21-0, I think, by the end of the first quarter, if not
Sound right.
early in the second. And that's still early in the game. That's too early in the game to just abandon your game plan. And so Arthur Smith stuck to his game plan, and for a little bit it worked. Because after the Bengals went up 21-0, the next drive for Atlanta had 18 plays, including that includes plays that were wiped out by penalties, but 18 plays and only 5 passes, but they got a touchdown, and it cut the
Yep.
lead to 21-7. And then in the final minutes, things went crazy. They got the deep touchdown to Damier Bird, I believe it's pronounced, and the punt return to set up a field goal, and they cut it to 28-17 at the half. But then they couldn't stay on the field, run or pass when they tried in the second half. The Bengals quickly went up 35-17, and from that point to the end of the game, the Falcons had 8 runs and only 6 passes. So that may be a point where they're just waving the white flag. Honestly,
Yeah.
like, this one's done. Let's move on to next week and get everyone healthy, or keep everyone healthy. So it's weird. I mean, if you want to rail on Arthur Smith for staying run heavy as his team faced a massive deficit, that's fine because that's what he did, and that's unusual. But I don't think that's why they lost the game. I think they lost the game because their defense couldn't stop Joe Burrow and couldn't stop Jamar Chase and couldn't stop Tyler Boyd. And it didn't matter if they ran 40 times, if they ran 0 times, their defense wasn't getting a stop this entire game, or certainly not in the first half. So that's why they lost. The play calling is weird. I don't think it had a huge effect on the game one way or the other. Um, and like you say, it's what they do. It is that's their identity. It's how they beat San Francisco the week before. It was still in the first half, and they had that one long touchdown drive. So I don't know, a weird game. I'm not going to overreact to it, and the Falcons are still probably a pretty bad team.
And it's weird to see in that situation too. 8th overall pick, first wide receiver taken. Drake London had just 1 target, and kind of thing. A lot of people calling now. I've seen a lot of people, calling for Desmond Ritter to be put in, the rookie that they drafted in I believe, the 3rd round. And saying if you don't trust Mariota to throw the ball, put him in. The thing is though, and this is something I talked about and looked up the numbers and had handy from talking with Mike on our recap show on Monday, is Mariota hasn't been terrible passing the ball either. He's 17th in DYAR among 34, I think 35 qualifying starters now, despite only being 24th in attempts. And he's 15th in DVOA. Not great, but not terrible. So maybe we'll see him throw the ball, like you said, maybe in the second half was just kind of waving the white flag type thing. That they're not going to stop the Bengals. They're not going to come back. The Bengals offense has been hot the last couple weeks.
Yeah, but before I think benching Mariota right now would be a panic move.
And they're
Three
winning.
and four.
They have a decent record right now, and they're still in the hunt for the division.
They're tied with Tampa Bay for the division lead right now, and I'm looking at their upcoming schedule here. Carolina at home, the Chargers at Carolina, Chicago at home, at Washington, Pittsburgh at home, and then a bye week. That's
Very
I'm looking,
favorable.
I'm looking at 6 winnable games there, man. So if they go four. Let's say they go 4-2 in that stretch. That puts them at 7-6, right in the wild card hunt. Stay the course.
Yep.
Stay the course. And just try to stay alive into that playoff race in December.
Yeah, seven wins again, even though they're not as good as 7 wins like they were last year. Could be a
Exactly.
very realistic thing. So stick with it. We'll see how it goes. Moving on to Monday night's game, switching to a team that won, the Bears. This offense looked a lot better on Monday. It seemingly due to the big stories having a lot more designed runs for Justin Fields. You think that's kind of the answer? You can't just stick with this all the time and expect it to work now because teams are going to catch on, things like that. But do you think that's kind of what that's been the key factor that this offense has been missing?
It's definitely been missing, and they definitely had their best game of the year on Monday. They hit 26 points, I think, in the third quarter. That was already the most points they had scored all year, and then added a late insurance touchdown. And then I think they had the ball again down by the goal line and decided to just take a knee, right? So yeah, definitely the offense's best game of the year. A lot more designed runs. And that's something people have been asking for a long time, and it was for the most part very effective. He had a couple of fumbles, fumbled handoff or fumbled snap that kind of messed with his DYAR numbers some. But still, like I said, the best game they had. But I also think, from what I have seen, that was his best game as a passer by miles. And maybe running around helps, get his mind settled, let him clear his head, because it wasn't just scramble drills, find a guy open, and it wasn't just find your first read and throw that automatically. He was sitting in the pocket, going through progressions, going to his second and third reads with some regularity, which I haven't seen him do before. Um, so, like I said, just his best game as a pro, I thought, by leaps and bounds. And how much of that is running, how much of that is passing is kind of hard to say. But if it works, keep doing it. So yeah, I wouldn't change a thing if I was Chicago. It is kind of funny. They've had this guy for a year and a half now, and it took almost 18 games. If I know 18, almost 20 some games, and two coaching staffs to realize, hey, he's good at running. Let's let him do that.
Yeah, people have been calling for it because I mean that's his skill set. Coming out of college and into the draft, he's a very mobile runner, can hurt you on the ground. So it's been surprising to not see them use that so much. But now that they've done it and it worked, we'll hope to see it keep going for Justin Fields' sake. As a Packers fan, I don't necessarily want to see them get good now, but I don't think we've got much. I've got my own problems to worry about with Green Bay than worrying about Chicago getting better right now. So, but definitely, like you said, their best game of the year so far. And you mentioned a couple of coaching staffs. Want to transition to a coaching staff that's in their first year, and that's someone it seems like we talk about every single week. It's Nathaniel Hackett, but it's deserved. Like, things are getting bad in Denver. They're bad from the start, basically. And a lot of times you can point to some positives when a team is struggling in a head coach's first season. Dan Campbell last year, they weren't expected to be good, and they were aggressive. They really fought. They stayed in a lot of games. He was aggressive on fourth downs. For Hackett, his first season, there's not much outside of the defense. Like, you bring in Russell Wilson, expect to be a Super Bowl contender. Do you think that he's in danger of getting the Steve Wilkes treatment and either getting fired after this first season or even before his first season is over?
Obviously a hard question to answer. We talked about his betting odds for getting fired. How I haven't
Mhm,
checked this week, but last week he was actually a odds-on favorite,
mhm.
at minus 190 or whatever it was a week or two ago. They play this week in the United Kingdom against Jacksonville. The latest word is that Russell Wilson will play. The eye roll of the week for Russell Wilson is that apparently on the plane flight over the United Kingdom, while everyone else was sleeping, he was doing high knees up and down the aisle, which has caused active players on other teams not involved in this game to roast him on Twitter for this kind of thing. It's one of those deals when he's always been a weirdo. He's always had this kind of eccentric behavior, which you can do when you're winning 10 games a year and leading the league in touchdowns and all that. But when you do the same behavior and your team's not winning, it sticks out. It's more it's easier to make fun of you that when that's going on. But getting back to Nathaniel Hackett, 2-5 right now. They got a weird UK game against Jacksonville, another disappointing team. I feel like anything can happen in these European games.
Yep.
The travel's so weird that they're very hard to predict. Um,
Especially
Urban
coming
Meyer,
back
won,
from.
Urban Meyer won a game in the United Kingdom, for God's sake. Um, so I'm looking at the back half of their schedule here. It's not because they have the bye after this week. Um, and then the Titans, Raiders, Panthers, Ravens, Chiefs, Cardinals, Rams, Chiefs again, and Chargers. That's a pretty tough slate. Um, Maybe not as dominant as we all thought it was going to be, or some of those teams are going to be, but Chiefs twice and Ravens. That's like the right now the silver and bronze medalists in the AFC behind the gold medal Bills. That's three tough games. Not a lot of cakewalks outside of Carolina, and they just beat a team better than Denver. Um, so
Yep.
you start to ask yourself, how many wins does Nathaniel Hackett need to keep his job? They're 2-5 right now. Let's say he wins finds a way to win 4 games over the back half of the slate and get to 6-11. Does that keep his job? Probably.
Yeah.
Um, and and Denver keep most of these games they're not getting blown out. They have lost 5 games, 4 of them were by 7 points or less. The other one, the final score was 10 or 11 points, but that includes a huge play where one of the running backs, I think it's Melvin Gordon, fumbled and the Raiders ran it back for a score. That's like a 10-point swing right there on that one play. So they've been close all year. At some point, you got to figure the luck has turned around. I'm kind of rambling. I'm kind of having a debate with myself here. But I'm going to guess that with the playoff picture in the AFC as murky as it is, there's still only 2 games out of a wild card spot, and
Mhm.
with a whole lot of time to go here. So long story short, I think I'm going to say that he makes it to the end of the year. Although what happens after that, I am not nearly as confident in.
Too bad they're not in the NFC, or their prospects would be a lot better for getting to the
Well,
playoffs. But do you think it helps him at all that, and maybe this is part of the reason Russ is struggling is because of the offense? But do you think it helps him that Russ has come over and is kind of being he doesn't look as good on the field, but also kind of being exposed just in general, as a lot of people saying, he seems like he always tries to say the right thing, and people kind of getting tired of him and then just not playing well in general. Do you think that helps his case at all, that it's not all on him?
Well, I mean, it helps him for the next 10 weeks or whatever we have left here,
Yeah, yeah.
because he's not been playing well. Plainly, that's obvious, and we have seen other teams put in their backups and fare well. Cooper Rush is the
Mhm.
most obvious example this year. Jimmy Garoppolo is technically still a backup. He was supposed to be a backup for Trey Lance, and they put him in and he's winning games. I think the Dolphins won some of their games when
Mhm.
Tagovailoa was out, if I'm not mistaken. But um, point is, a backup quarterback should not be a surrender or a forfeit. You should be competitive. And the
Yep.
Broncos, despite the best efforts of their defense, just were not. The problems on this team go way beyond Russell Wilson. It's a talent thing. It's a coaching thing. Nobody seems to be on the same page. Melvin Gordon doesn't know if he's benched or not. That seems to change every week. They're making it up as they go.
Yep.
Um, there weren't a lot of like obvious strategic errors or bad decisions in this Jets loss for Denver. They just got outplayed. But you got outplayed by the Jets. I know they've won 4 in a row, but you watch Zach Wilson play, this streak is not going to continue, and they have their own injury problems that are going to make sure that doesn't continue either. Um, I don't know. It's a huge mess, and they're going to have a lot of hard questions to answer over the offseason. But I think we talked about this before, but the extension Wilson signed, they can't move on from him.
Mhm.
So if you're going to make a change, you can't change the quarterback. You usually end up changing the coach.
Yeah, so not looking good. I did pull some of the numbers. So looking at Denver last week through week 7, they were 22nd overall, just like they are this year, but their DVOA was a little bit worse. But on offense, it's obviously a huge difference. They were 4.8% offensive DVOA. That was 16th in the league. This year through week 7, they're minus 16.8, which is 29th. Obviously, the defense is much better, but as we all know, a huge drop off on offense, which is not what any of us expected given what Denver had at quarterback last year. And then looking at the coach rankings, Nathaniel Hackett actually has dropped down now to be 31st in CCI. We talked last week. I don't even think he was in the bottom 5. He's lost 50% of a game in cumulative win probability. 7 good fourth down go decisions by our count, which is right around middle of the pack, but he has the most errors in the league on critical calls, which I don't think is surprising, having watched those games so far this year and all the times we've talked to him. So has a lot of work to do over the next few weeks to hang on there in Denver. Want to switch over now, like we always do, look at some good matchups for this week. Let's talk about some good things. Games that we're most looking forward to. We've got a lot of the good teams back from bye. Buffalo's back in action. Philly, Minnesota, and the Rams, who don't know if I qualify them as a good team right now, but those other ones kind of top of the pack right now. But what is the matchup you're most looking forward to this week, Vince?
So I think we talked about some disappointing teams like Denver and Tampa Bay. I think if you were to pull football fans and ask who is the most surprising team this year, I think the top 3 answers you would get in some order would be the Jets, the Giants, and the Seahawks. Now, we've already talked about the Jets a little bit and how they're kind of playing over their heads and have a bunch of injury problems. I don't think they're going to finish as strong as they look right now. But those other two teams, the 6-1 New York Giants and the 4-3 Seattle Seahawks, the Giants managed to win every week just by staying out of the way and letting the opponent beat themselves. And the Seahawks are managing to win by getting really good quarterbacking out of Geno Smith, a lot of boom and bust performance out of Kenneth Walker, who gets a lot of highlight runs. But if you check our running backs page, he's actually last in the league in success rate right now.
Wow.
So basically, he's going to go for 0 yards or 20 yards every time you hand off to him. And a defense that was horrible earlier in the year, but has now put together 2 strong games in a row. And I thought not last week's game against the Chargers, but the game before that against the Cardinals, I thought that was more the Cardinals beating themselves. I thought the Seahawks happened to be the defense that was on the field that day. But when they came out and really took it to the Chargers, and they gave up a couple some scoring drives there, but that's a pretty good offense, I think we all think, and they didn't look like they were in the Seahawks league. That was very strange based on how the Seahawks defense has played most of this year. But they've got the rookie corners playing well, and the 2 rookies on the offensive line that are playing well. Anyway, I'm going on about the Seahawks forever. Point is, these are the 2 of the most surprising teams in the league. The Giants are the top wildcard team right now, only because the Eagles haven't lost yet. The Seahawks are in first place in their division. They're probably both going to make the playoffs. In fact, now that I think about it, this could well be a playoff preview, but more relevant as pertains to this, the coaching standings show, coach rankings show. This game could decide who wins the coach of the year, whether it's Brian Daboll with the Giants or Pete Carroll with the Seahawks. I think Daboll's everyone's favorite right now, as long as he can keep them. First or second place in the NFC, it's probably his award to lose. But if Carroll
the Eagles
wants
don't
to,
go undefeated.
and the Eagles don't go undefeated. If Pete Carroll wants to make a charge for that, and he'd be one of the strong candidates too, beating Brian Daboll and the Giants would be a good start in that campaign. So a lot of postseason hardware could be riding on this game Sunday afternoon in Seattle.
And what surprised me, you mentioned the Seattle defense. I was looking up something, it might have been for the waiver wire column or another show I was doing, but Seattle actually has the number 1 defense over the last 2 weeks. They're top 3 against the pass and the run over those 2 weeks. So to your point, just have been very strong, as well as that offense, who's number 4, I think, in passing offense. Geno Smith has looked really good. For me, that was one that I looked at that I'm really looking forward to. I went a different direction and with Chicago at Dallas, partly because of what we just talked about with the Bears. They had the 6th best overall DVOA in week 7. The defense was the 3rd best of the week. Offense was a little bit more middle of the pack, but it was their best offensive performance of the year, their only game above average against what was a 7th-ranked New England defense. So a really strong performance. They go against another tough defense, even tougher defense, the Cowboys. 2nd best in DVOA. Want to see if they can continue success, if they kind of roll that game plan over from last week. Probably won't be exactly the same. Dallas is a much better team, as we know, and you can't use the exact same game plan every week in the NFL. But interested to see if they utilize a lot more of not only getting Justin Fields on those design runs, but also getting him out of the pocket, like you said, and seeing how they prepare and basically strategize for this game against, again, what is a very good defense in the Dallas Cowboys. So really excited to see that one, as maybe not a super exciting game. But then on the other side, Mike McCarthy, he's had his criticisms, and gotten his fair share, but they're in a really good spot this year, looking pretty good. So this will be one that if they come out and lose, it's not going to look good for him at all. So really good one for me. So not the most exciting football game maybe, but those are what I'm looking for in that game, and pretty excited to see that. That will do it for our Week 8 Coach Ranking Show. Before we go, don't forget about that free $100 you can get from Underdog Fantasy using promo code OUTSIDERS, even in states where traditional prop betting is not available. Underdog will match your deposit up to $100 Again, that's promo code OUTSIDERS. Also, don't forget to sign up for FO Plus at footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. For NFL betting picks, you get against the spread, money line, and totals now, as well as premium stats and articles. You get an ad-free experience and early access to all of the data on Monday. And last but certainly not least, join us on the Football Outsiders Discord for in-game conversation for every game beginning tomorrow night, Thursday, the Ravens and Bucks, which is another one that's going to be a really good matchup coaching-wise and on the field. So a lot to look forward to this weekend. Thanks for joining us, Vince. Thanks for joining me as always.
Thanks again, Ian. Let's do it next week.